Imagine, explore, entertain. Imagine. To imagine means to develop a mental image of what you are thinking about. When you write to imagine, you are using words to develop the image you want the reader to think about. Think about planning your writing carefully using a good introduction, an interesting development, and a satisfying conclusion. The vocabulary you can use. Ways of presenting a character. What sort of setting you will use. The atmosphere the reader might imagine. Writing to involve the reader's imagination. You are telling the story of two people in a spaceship. To involve the reader in the story, use description and comment to explain what happens. In your introduction, you can address the reader directly. Write in the first person to involve them in your thoughts. Start with a description of the setting. Examples of beginnings. Introduction. List ideas for attracting the reader's attention. Think about starting your story using imagine, reader, that you are in a dark, empty space. Or I hated deep space. The blackness always got to me. Or the stars lit the way like beacons of lighthouses blazing in the black, empty sea that was space. In your development, you can comment on events. Say what the events are. These could be the problems that the space travellers have to deal with. Say how the space travellers respond to the events. Say what you think about the events. Conclude with a memorable image for the reader. Story task. Write the story of the two space travellers. Explain why they are in space. Describe the spaceship and the voyagers. Explain the problem they are facing and what they do to solve the problem. Using figurative language. Use figurative language in your writing. This means using similes and metaphors to interest the reader. Similes compare two things using as or like. For example, she was as agile as a bird in flight. He ran like a cheetah. Metaphors compare two different things to make a strong image. For example, the blazing furnace of the sun kept the desert unbearably hot. Here, furnace and sun are compared. They are both extremely hot, and this metaphor emphasizes the heat of the sun. Exploring your writing. To explore ideas in writing means to think about different ways of using language, words, to express ideas, and to tell about events in writing. You can use different images to help the reader think about what you are describing. You can use figurative language, similes and metaphors to express ideas in different ways. You can present the same idea in different formats, such as a letter, a story, a poem, or a newspaper article. Pairs activity. Get into pairs. Read the following fable and then discuss with your partner how you could turn it into a newspaper story.
A hare was once boasting to the other animals about how fast he could run.
"I challenge any one of you to a race,"
he said. The tortoise said quietly,
"I accept your challenge."
The hare thought this was a good joke.
"I could dance round you all the way,"
he said.
"Keep your boasting until you've won the race,"
said the tortoise.
"Shall we begin?"
At once the hare ran off out of sight. He was sure he would win, and to show his contempt for the tortoise, he lay down to have a nap. He was soon sound asleep. Meanwhile the tortoise plodded on, and when the hare awoke, he saw the tortoise almost at the winning post. The hare leapt up, but it was too late. The tortoise had won. Then the tortoise turned to the hare and said,
"It is better to work slowly and steadily than to have great talents and waste them."
To retell the story of the hare and the tortoise as a newspaper story, think about the headline. The who, where, when, what, how and why questions you need to answer for the reader. The language and images you will use. How you will present the characters. Will they be a hare and a tortoise or two people involved in a race? Writing to entertain. When you write to entertain, you are trying to use words and sentences in an unusual and interesting way. You are using your imagination to develop your ideas. Think about how to present a piece of writing in a different format. Use words to create a mood, happy or sad. Use words to convey the tone of the writing, serious, sarcastic, amusing. Remember, entertain means to think about an idea and write about it in an interesting way. Pairs activity. In pairs, discuss the extract shown and explain how the writers entertain the reader with their ideas. 1. From the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf.
Through the dark night a darker shape slid. A sinister figure writhed down from the moors, over high shoulders, sopping tussocks, over sheep runs, over gurgling streams. It writhed towards the timbered hall, huge and hairy and slightly stooping, its long arms swung loosely.
2. The Mulips by J.R.R. Tolkien.
The shadows where the mulips dwell are dark and wet as ink, and slow and softly rings their bell, as in the slime you sink.
3. Cicero's offices. The duties belonging to each age.
It is required then of the younger sort of people that they pay due reverence to those that are old, and choose out the best and approved among them, by whose counsel and direction they may steer their lives.
Combining imagine, explore, entertain. When you write, you use your imagination to explore ideas and to entertain the reader. You can be given descriptions, narrative stories, play scripts or poetry to write. For example, write a description of a stormy day. How would you make sure that your approach is different to another person's? Your approach. Think about an unusual start. Using your experience. The setting. Using different senses. The format to use. Story, poem, song. Useful images and vocabulary. Combining imagine, explore, entertain task. Plan to write about a stormy day. Imagine that you are in a particular place where you can appreciate the full drama of the storm. Concentrate on what you can hear from the moment the storm begins until when it finally dies away. Think about how will you introduce the setting? How will you use the sense of hearing to help the reader understand what the day is like? How will you conclude your piece? Will the wind and rain die down or carry on to somewhere else? Make a list of all the images and words that you could use in this piece of writing. Use dictionaries, a thesaurus, poems and stories for ideas. When you have got your vocabulary together, plan and write your description. Developing imagine, explore and entertain. Increase your word power by finding words that will help you to describe your ideas effectively. Choose an image and work out different ways of describing it. Decide what sort of tone you will use in your writing: serious, playful, formal or informal. Think about the different formats for writing that you can use. Stories, play scripts, autobiographical writing, diaries, newspapers. Try unusual ways of starting your writing. Always plan carefully and check for spelling, punctuation and paragraphs when you write. Inform, explain, describe. Informing people. When giving information, organize and present information clearly. Select the correct information. Write the information so that the reader can understand it. There are different ways of presenting information. Orally, using signs, symbols and pictures. Using writing devices, headings, subheadings, paragraphs, simple and complex sentences, bullet points, different fonts. The language used is clear, formal, factual and organized. Organizing writing to inform. When organizing writing to inform, remember to research and select the correct information. Plan and draft your work. Reread and edit information. Use appropriate writing devices. Use clear and precise language. When writing to inform, remember to use headings, subheadings, paragraphs, simple and complex sentences, bullet points, different fonts, true facts, clear language, any helpful symbols, pictures or signs. Global warming task. Design an information sheet about global warming. Think about the information you need, the facts you want the reader to notice, the order and layout of the information sheet. Use the planning guide below to help. 1. Research the information that you need. You could use some of the information from the previous activity. 2. List the facts you are going to use and put them in the order you want to use them. 3. Write your headline. Think about font size and words that will let the reader know what the information sheet is about. 4. Write your introduction. Define global warming. 5. Write the facts in the order you think is best. You might want to use bullet points here. 6. Write your conclusion. It should remind people what they need to understand what global warming is and its effects on the world. 7. Check your writing for punctuation and spelling. 8. Edit and produce your final draft on the colour and style of paper you think will attract the reader's attention. Explanation writing. To explain shows how and why and gives reasons that the reader will understand. Information must be clear, accurate. Features of explanation writing include specialist vocabulary, a formal tone, correct use of tense, person and connectives, a planned and structured response, introduction, development and conclusion. When writing an explanation, think about what the reader needs to know, how to write the information clearly. Developing explanation writing. When writing your explanation, list the information you are going to use. Number the information in sequence. Plan your introduction. How will you introduce the topic? Develop your explanation. Use clear language and a formal tone. Avoid don't, doesn't and other contracted words. An explanation does not use informal language. Write in the third person. Conclude your explanation. The reader should know that you have given all the necessary information. Writing to describe. Descriptive writing presents the reader with a clear mental image of what is being described. The features of descriptive writing include descriptions of events, processes or situations, use of imagery to provide detail, formal language, planned and structured writing, use of either first or third person. Descriptive writing is found in poetry, fiction, non-fiction, stories, letters, diaries, brochures and prospectuses that tell the reader about an institution. Descriptive writing examples. Here are examples of different types of descriptive writing. The Eagle by Lord Tennyson.
He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls, he watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls.
The Second Jungle Book by R. Kipling.
Mowgli, who had never known what real hunger meant, fell back on stale honey, 3 years old, scraped out of deserted rock ives, honey as black as a sloe and dusty with dried sugar.
The New Technical School Prospectus.
The school caters for 1,000 pupils aged 11 to 16. It has excellent ICT suites in each learning block, and pupils are allowed access to them outside lessons. Subjects are taught in spacious, specially designed classrooms, which are all equipped with interactive whiteboards.
When writing to describe a person, place or object, visualize the person, place or object. Add details to make the description clearer and give the reader a chance to visualize the character, place or object. Think about introduction, gain the reader's interest, development, what you need to write to ensure the reader understands your description, conclusion, how to summarize your description and what final points you need to make. Characters description. In pairs, describe one of the characters you can see. Change your visual image into a written description of the character. Think about the advice you have just read. List the details you want to put in your description and plan your writing carefully. Read your description out to another pair. Do they think you have described the character accurately? When describing a place or object, think about what the purpose of the place or object is, what the important details are, the order they should go in, how to organize your introduction, development and conclusion. If you need to use any writing devices, such as diagrams, pictures, maps, bullet points. The language you use to describe, make sure your choice of vocabulary is appropriate for the place or object. Descriptions writing task. Choose which task you would like to do. Task 1. You are writing a prospectus for your school. In a group, design and write the prospectus. Plan your writing. Each member of the group could describe a different aspect of the school for the reader. Or, Task 2. Describe in detail an object most people will be familiar with, but do not name the object. Read your description to a partner. Can they tell you what the object is? With your partner, design a "What am I?" quiz, which has at least 10 different objects. Writing to persuade. When you write to persuade, you want the reader to agree with you and accept the facts and opinions you present. Features, facts, opinions, suggestions, rhetorical questions, persuasive language, logical structuring of ideas. When you write, you need to plan carefully, anticipate how the reader might respond to the point you make. Think about any objections they may make to your suggestions. Using persuasive language. Persuasive writing is used to present ideas to the reader that they respond to by agreeing with them. Persuasive language has to convince the reader, appeal to the reader's intellect and emotions, present facts and opinions that the reader will accept, be carefully planned and written. When writing persuasively, you should present your case using appropriate evidence, facts, rhetorical questions and opinions, an emotional appeal that is convincing, appropriate language. Persuasive language task. Read the following leaflet. Identify the persuasive language in it. Do you think it will persuade children to clean their teeth? Developing persuasive writing. To develop your persuasive writing skills, think about the way you would plan and write an article for a newspaper persuading young people to have their eyes checked each year. Think about the facts you would need to use, the sort of language you would use to appeal to the reader to get their eyes checked, what sort of rhetorical questions you would ask, how would you introduce the subject, develop and conclude it. Persuasive writing task. Research, plan and write your persuasive article on having eye checks. Some facts you can use. 12% of children have undetected eye problems. 43% of children have never had an eye test. Eye tests are free to under 16s and to under 18s in education. Eye tests detect eye diseases and health problems such as diabetes. Eye tests ensure that young people can see properly. Eye tests are an essential health check. Think about the layout of your article, the audience you are writing it for. Writing to argue, using signposts. When presenting an argument in writing, you need to clearly show the reader the points you are making. We call these points signpost arguments. They show the reader the logical points that make your argument convincing. Paragraphs. In each paragraph, introduce your argument or point of view. Develop your view by explaining it more fully. Supply supporting evidence to back up your argument. Conclude your argument by summing up the points you have made. Presenting an argument. When you present an argument, remember that you want the reader to agree with you, to understand the points you are making. The features of an argument include a confident tone. The writer understands the points he/she is making. An impersonal tone. The use of simple and complex sentences. Rhetorical questions. Repetition. Presenting an argument task. Present an argument either for or against allowing pupils to listen to music in class. Make sure you have an introduction that explains what the argument is about, a development that shows your point of view with evidence and takes other viewpoints into account, A conclusion that sums up your points and persuades the reader to agree with you. Writing an advice article. When we need to make decisions, we often need advice. Good advice shows us the possible consequences of our actions and presents us with alternative choices. Advice can be found in letters, articles, leaflets. Features of advice writing may be in the second person, headings and subheadings, bullet points and lists, imperative verbs, tell the reader, gives reasons and uses evidence, uses formal and informal language. Structuring advice writing. When you write to advise, remember there should be an introduction, a paragraph that tells the reader what the advice is about. The main development, 2 or 3 paragraphs that show the reader the consequences of not following the advice given. The development should also show the alternatives that are available, if there are any. The conclusion, a paragraph that sums up the advice given and urges the reader to follow it. Analysing a text. When you analyse a text, firstly identify the genre. Is it fiction, novels and stories, adventure, science fiction, fantasy, biographical, drama or poetry? Non-fiction, newspaper articles, advertisements, television, diaries, autobiography, ICT or reference texts. Remember, you must identify the content, the main points and important ideas. Explain the structure, the parts that make up the text. Comment on the reader's response to the text. What sense do they make of it? Design task. Your task is to design posters for your classroom wall. Firstly, you will need to split into small groups. Half of the groups need to design a poster which shows different types of non-fiction texts, and the other set of groups need to design a poster which shows a range of fiction texts. Remember to make your posters clear and interesting. Writing an analysis of a text. When you write an analysis of a text, think about your introduction. Identify the genre of the text and explain what the text is about. Write about 4 or 5 sentences. Your development. Explain the structure of the text. Show how it helps the reader to understand what the text is about. Write 2 or 3 paragraphs. Your conclusion. You sum up your points and give your response to the text. Write a paragraph. Identifying genre task. Read the passage and think about which genre you think it is.
William the Conqueror was born in 1028 and on his father's death became his heir. He developed into a strong leader and was a good military commander. In 1066, William the Conqueror arrived in England to claim the throne that he said had been promised to him. After winning the Battle of Hastings, he set about subduing the Anglo-Saxons. By the time he died in 1087, Norman French was the language of the court, and the Anglo-Saxons were second-class citizens.
The passage is an example of an historical text. When writing to analyse, make sure a fair and balanced point of view is offered. Remember to comment on all aspects of the text, how it is presented, use of language, how points are made, are they well made or poorly made? What evidence is there in the text to prove your points? Plan your writing carefully to avoid missing out anything you need to include. Check and edit your writing before you produce your final draft. Analysing a text task. Analyse what the reader learns about Mary Seacole, a Jamaican woman skilled in nursing cholera. Mary Seacole lived from 1805 to 1881.
When Mary Seacole heard about the cholera epidemic, she travelled to London to offer her services to the British Army. There was considerable prejudice against women's involvement in medicine, and her offer was rejected. When the Times publicised the fact that a large number of British soldiers were dying of cholera, there was a public outcry, and the government was forced to change its mind. Florence Nightingale, who had little practical experience of cholera, was chosen to take a team of 39 nurses to treat the sick soldiers. Although Mary Seacole was an expert at dealing with cholera, her application to join Florence Nightingale's team was rejected. Mary, who had become a successful businesswoman in Jamaica, decided to travel to the Crimea at her own expense. She visited Florence Nightingale at her hospital at Scutari, but once again Mary's offer of help was refused. Unwilling to accept defeat, Mary started up a business called the British Hotel, a few miles from the battlefront. Here she sold food and drink to the British soldiers. With the money she earned from her business, Mary was able to finance the medical treatment she gave to the soldiers. Whereas Florence Nightingale and her nurses were based in a hospital several miles from the front, Mary Seacole treated her patients on the battlefield. On several occasions she was found treating wounded soldiers from both sides while the battle was still going on.
Reviewing a text. To review means to examine a text critically. You need to make fair and well-balanced objective comments about the text. Use evidence from the text, PEE, to prove your points. Comment on the context in which it has been written. Context means the contents of the text before and after the part you are reviewing. Say how readers are likely to respond to the text. What sense do they make of the text? When reviewing a text, remember to plan an introduction. Identify the genre. Development. Comment on writer's purpose. Comment on structure. Use a formal tone. Use simple and complex sentences. Choose which person to write in, second or third. List the points you want to include in the development of your review. Conclusion. Sum up your ideas about the text. Commenting on texts. When you comment on a text, you present a point of view that is a result of a careful analysis of the text. You need to comment on what is said, content, how it is said, language, the structure of the text. You need to explain how a writer uses particular words and phrases to influence the reader's thinking. You also need to comment on your response to the text. When writing to comment, plan carefully. Think about identifying the key points of the text, explaining the structure of the text, commenting on the tone, person and opinions expressed, using an introduction, development and conclusion to structure your writing, commenting on a text task. Read the comments below written about a report of a football match and answer the question.
When I read the article, England's Footballing Nightmare, in last night's paper, I felt that the writer had not done the team justice. His use of derogatory language when he referred to the poor attacking play ignored the fine goals that were scored during the game. The article commented on the behaviour of the fans as if they had been misbehaving when there were only 20 arrests for loutish behaviour. The fact that England won the match was not mentioned except at the beginning of the article. A reader might be forgiven for thinking that the team had lost. I think that England matches should not be criticised when the team wins, as this spoils their victory.
Is the writer giving the impression to the reader that the report was biased against the team? Yes, the reader is given the impression that the report was biased against the team. Developing writing skills. Imagery. When you are writing to show what you are imagining, you have to choose your words carefully. They have to show the reader exactly what you are thinking about. Imagery. Key points. Remember, words that describe nouns are called adjectives. Words that describe verbs are called adverbs. Alliteration can be found in sentences that include words beginning with the same letters. Similes compare two things using as or like. Metaphors compare two different things, often by describing one thing as being something else, in order to make a strong image. Using visualization to develop ideas. When you use visualization or daydreaming, your mind starts to explore lots of different possibilities. Use visualization to develop your ideas when writing. You can start with a simple exercise. Imagine an empty table. Now imagine it is set with knives and forks for a meal. Next, think about the meal you would like to see on the table. Think about how the food smells, how the food tastes, how the food looks. Now think about how you would use words to describe the meal. Describing task. Here is a list of words and phrases that might help you with your description. Smell, aroma, odour, fragrance, sniff. Taste, flavour, relish, sip. Looks, gaze, anticipate, appear, appearance, sight. Task. Select 2 words from each list and put them into sentences that can be used to describe the meal you thought of. Using word association to develop ideas. When you think of one word, quite often other words will pop into your head. For example, hot, cold. Tap, water. Holiday, sunshine. Plane, sky. Stars, space. These words can set you thinking and give you ideas to write about. When given a topic, use word association to help develop your ideas. Word association task. Read the example of writing that has used word association. The first word was old. Old, tired, stiff, walking stick.
The old man was tired. He had walked a long way to get to his destination, and his legs were stiff. He had not used his walking stick, as he had left it at home.
Task. Use the word below to start off your word association list. You will need to add 4 of your own. Then write a few sentences using them. Decide with a partner if you have written an interesting paragraph. First word in the list. Young. Developing sentences. When you are writing, look at the sentences you are using. Writing sentences in a logical sequence makes your writing easier to understand. Simple sentences can be developed and extended to give the reader a better picture of what you are describing. Adding imagery helps the reader to see what is in your mind more clearly. Sentence development. Here is an example of developing a sentence.
The day was cold.
This is a simple sentence telling the reader a fact about the day.
When I woke up and looked out of the frosty window, I realised that it was going to be another cold day, as there was snow scattered on the ground.
This is a complex sentence with imagery that gives the reader more information about the day. Structuring your writing. When you are writing, remember to group your sentences into paragraphs. A paragraph has 4 or 5 different sentences in it that are connected to each other. Paragraphs link the ideas in the text together so that the writing makes sense to the reader. Each paragraph develops an idea or point that the writer wants to make to the reader. Using a timeline to develop your ideas. When you write a narrative, you need to make sure that you are keeping your ideas in a logical sequence. Using a timeline or incident line can help you organize your ideas into the order you want to use them. A timeline puts the events in your story into the order that they happen. An incident line puts the things that happen in your story in the order you want them to appear in your story. Incidents task. After you have organized the timeline and incident line, add 2 more incidents and 1 more point to the timeline. Now use the lines to write a story titled, "The Day Tyrone Was Ill." Using other sources for ideas to develop your writing. You can inspire your writing in other ways. For example, listen to sounds and use them to generate ideas. Use music to help you to develop ideas about mood and emotions. Use pictures to give you ideas about describing a setting. Use an image to help you to develop word association ideas. Remember to use adjectives and adverbs, similes and metaphors, simple and complex sentences, paragraphs. Always plan, draft and edit your writing. Developing your writing task. Use the image you see and the sounds that you hear to write a story. Plan your writing using some of the techniques you have just learned about.